Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Arjun, and over the weekend I got to watch my most anticipated movie of 2024, Dune Part 2. Now, I've been excited for this movie ever since the first one ended. This was my third or second most anticipated movie of 2023 before it obviously got delayed, and in 2024, it was my most anticipated movie of the year. So walking into the theater, I was very excited. Obviously, the reviews were absolutely fantastic. People were praising this to be one of the greatest movies of all time. So I was obviously very excited. And before I share my thoughts on this movie, guys, let me know down in the comments if you have seen Dune Part 2, what did you think about it? And obviously, what were your expectations for it? How excited are you to watch it if you have not seen it yet? And also, give me your viewpoint. Are you someone that has read the books and saw the first movie, or are you someone that only watched the movie and never read the books? Now, me personally, I have never read any of the Dune books. I don't know anything about Dune other than the lore from the first film. And obviously this one now that I've seen it. But before watching this one, the only stuff I knew about Dune was from the first movie. So I'm not someone that's like heavily into Dune. It was just the first Dune movie just completely captured me, and it was one of my favorite movies of 2021. So that's the reason I was so excited for this one. And after watching the movie, all I can say is this movie absolutely just took my breath away. It was absolutely fantastic in every single way. The people that are rating this to be one of the greatest movies ever made, I don't know if I'll go that far, but this is honestly absolutely fantastic. It's a technical achievement, it's a cinematic achievement, on a storytelling level, it's a great achievement. The fact that they were able to adapt this book that a lot of people said was really hard to adapt. This is a movie that is definitely just something you have to watch on the biggest screen possible. It's a great story, but on a technical level, the visuals, it's something that just completely enraptures you and takes you into a completely new world, which I felt throughout this entire movie. The only thing I could really compare this to, especially stuff that came out recently, are some of the top tier movies like the Batman, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Oppenheimer. When I'm comparing this to any movies that have come out recently, those are the ones that come to mind because this is a movie of that caliber. It is on that level for me, at least, and obviously for a lot of other people, just because they're rating it so high. And being compared to movies like those is obviously fantastic, because of how good those movies are, and in my opinion, at least. So me saying this is being compared to those movies is me saying that this is a fantastic film. And it's a movie that is obviously going to be compared to a lot of those amazing sequels like Empire Strikes Back. People say that about a lot of movies these days. This is the Empire Strikes Back of this generation. Like, people said that about Avengers Infinity War. People said that about Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. People said that about Across the Spider-Verse just last year. But it really applies to a lot of these movies, but I think this is one where it also makes a lot of sense just because it is also a sci-fi movie, just like Empire Strikes Back. It leaves a lot of dangling threads towards the future of the franchise. And I think that's where my issues with the movie come. Like, when people say this is one of the greatest movies ever made, I understand it, but at the same time, although this movie concluded a lot of things that the first movie set up, it concluded the story that the first movie set up, but it left a lot of stuff hanging for the future of this franchise. Meaning that even though it didn't end in the middle of the story like the first movie did, it ended on a cliffhanger still. At least that's how I felt. Like, if you're going into this movie expecting it to wrap everything up in a bow, it really does not do that. You're going to be left hanging at the end of the movie. You're going to be like, that's it? That's how I felt. I was so flabbergasted when this movie ended. Arguably more than Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, because with that one, even though it ended on a hard cliffhanger in the middle of the story, I knew that it was going to be a cliffhanger. I knew it was a part 1 of 2. I didn't know that about this. I thought Dune Part 2 was supposed to be the end of the story, because obviously I haven't read the book, so maybe my expectations were on a different level than people that have read the book. But since I've not read the book, I did not know that it doesn't actually end. It led to so many things hanging that I was like so weirded out when it ended. I almost felt kind of cheated, because even though it paid off the main story arc that was playing out in these two movies, the amount of stuff it left hanging is kind of crazy. Like if I'm thinking about it, I don't want to go into spoilers, obviously, but it just set so many things up that I honestly felt cheated because it felt like it didn't pay off. With that being said, though, this is a movie that really deserves to be called epic. People throw that word around a lot these days, but this is one it actually applies to. Epic is the only way to describe this movie. It is big, it is grand, the scope is huge, it's massive. Denis Villeneuve just knows how to make movies that are big and massive. And I've especially felt that with a lot of his sci-fi flicks. Even some of his sci-fi flicks that I think are a little overrated, like Arrival. I think that movie is quite overrated, but it's still like you feel the scope of that movie. And I think this is probably his biggest movie as far as scope and size goes, because you have big war sequences, epic scenes throughout the whole movie that you're just awe-inspired by while watching the movie, which I think was fantastic. And the music by Hans Zimmer really helps with that. There's so many moments where the music swells and you just want to get up out of your seat and clap your hands. I really felt that a lot of this movie. Like, this movie made me feel what movies like Spider-Man, No Way Home, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame made me feel, but in different level, because those are movies that have cameos, and obviously you get excited for stuff like that. This movie, I got excited for stuff that are story related, that just pulls so many emotions out of you. And when the music swells, you have these epic wide takes. Greg Fraser's cinematography is obviously fantastic. It's so cool to watch a movie like this where you have this massive world where basically none of it is real. It's all visual effects, but it is really well done visual effects. It's so good. You can never tell where the line between reality and CGI is. The worms look real, the big epic fight sequences look real. Even if you compare it to something like Avatar and Avatar 2, which obviously have fantastic effects. I don't want to take anything away from those. Those probably have better effects overall compared to this movie, because those are bringing something non-existent into real life, like aliens that obviously look like blue creatures. Like that's hard to do. But this is a different kind of visual effects. Like over there, you can tell they're visual effects just because they're blue, they're like 70 feet tall. You can tell they're visual effects. Here you really can't, because it's just desert. It's real people. It's people in armor, and it's so hard to tell when it's visual effects because it is so well done. Every frame of this movie looks real, and that's something I can't say about a lot of big budget movies these days. So I think that's a huge rewarding experience because of that. Hans Zimmer's score is obviously absolutely fantastic, and like there's these things going around online of like what song makes you feel like you're levitating or like your soul leaves your body and stuff, like images like this on screen. I think Hans Zimmer's score in this movie kind of did that to me at a lot of moments, because his score takes from the first movie, but also adds different layers to it. I don't know if I'd say it's better than the first movie, just because a lot of this movie's score is from the first movie, just different like variations of the same music. As an overall experience, the score just adds so much to the story, and I think the score for this movie makes me feel like that. Hans Zimmer is obviously one of the best composers working today, but I think this movie just goes on to solidify that, and every movie he does, it just does the same thing. But here, especially just because of how epic and grand this movie is, and whenever the music swells, you just kind of feel like your soul is leaving your body and going into this world, and it's special. Like there's very few movies that make you feel emotions that intense, and I think this movie, just all the technical aspects come together to do that. So it really did feel like God was reaching into my soul and pulling it out. Like it was insane how I felt while watching this movie. Speaking of God, there's a lot of religious undertones in this movie, which I did not expect at all. Like the way they incorporate religion into this movie is very unexpected, because the first movie is a lot about politics, and this movie is too. This movie has just as much politics as the first one does, if not even more, but it also has underlying religious themes, which I thought was a really cool idea. The idea of this Lisan al-Gaib figure, like Paul Atreides being this guy that's going to lead the Fremen into paradise, it's a cool idea, but it's also something that really warrants having a religious story, religious theme underneath it. And I think Denis Villeneuve does a great job of exploring the positives and negatives of that. because you have characters like Stilgar and other people in the Fremen that believe that Paul Atreides is the Lisan al-Gaib, which also leads to some comedic moments which I thought were really funny. You also have people that are completely opposed the viewpoint. They don't believe that there's going to be a savior that shows up to lead the Fremen into paradise. They believe that the Fremen should fight for themselves instead of waiting for figures like that, which I thought was so deep. I thought was so profound. Paul's arc throughout this movie is also absolutely fantastic, where you see him transform into really a completely different person by the end. It's different, and I do think it's a little rushed the way some of it plays out, but I think overall just his arc is very rewarding by the end of the movie, but also almost terrifying because of this idea of the Lisan al-Gaib. You don't know if the ending of this movie is a good thing or a bad thing because of how the movie plays out and how it sets up these different factions like the Bene Gesserit, how they're manipulating everything going on in this story and how everything's just going their way in a lot of ways. Another character I thought was so interesting in this movie was Rebecca Ferguson's character, Lady Jessica, Paul Atreides' mother. And she's a very weird character because in the first one, to me at least, she was my personal favorite character. And in this movie, she is very different. She doesn't feel like the same person, just like Paul. She feels like throughout the movie, she just completely switches up, which I thought was interesting. But also she's pregnant, so she has a baby, and like she becomes a figure to the Fremen that I think was very interesting. And she starts to manipulate people too. Like you see the Bene Gesserit in her come out a lot more in this movie than in the first one. It's so weird to say that, but she does not feel like a good guy. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what they were going for. Having like a prophecy like this is just taking everything, like everyone into different sides. Everyone believes in different things, which add complexities and layers to these characters, which I thought was a fantastic addition to the story. And it makes it feel a lot more lived in and a lot more real because it's more complex and complicated than just good guys, bad guys, and stuff like that. There's division between the good guys, there's division between the bad guys, and I think that's really interesting. There's also a few new characters in this movie that I wanted to talk about. I think Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, I think that's how you say his name. I thought he was a very cool addition to this story. He doesn't have a crazy amount of screen time, but whenever he's on screen, he just chews up the scenery. There's a whole sequence on the Harkonnen planet. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's Gedi Prime or something. The Harkonnen planet, I thought that whole sequence was really cool because their planet has like a black sun. So everything's black and white, but it's not black and white in the sense that it's just desaturated. It's black and white in the sense that everyone looks painted white, and then everything that's black looks painted black. It doesn't look like your normal black and white in movies, which I thought was very interesting. That was very confusing to me when I watched the trailers, but when I watched the movie, it made a little more sense. So I thought that was really cool. But just Austin Butler in general, his presence in this movie is insane. Because the only movie I've seen him in, I think, is Elvis. So comparing the two of these, his performance just changes up so much. I think he just does a fantastic job of playing like a psychopath in a lot of ways. He's such a cool character that like you can't take your eyes off him because there's so many things about him that are so interesting. And he also is someone that really you don't know what side he's on. He's unpredictable. You can see him kill random people at random times. You can also see him kill his own people at random times. Like he's not really trustworthy, and that's something I thought was such a cool addition. You also have Christopher Walken as the Emperor, and I think he was very underdeveloped. I don't really know if it's Christopher Walken's fault because he didn't have a lot of screen time. Like his performance, it only really comes down to a couple of scenes, and because of that, I don't feel like I ever connected with the character much. He feels like just very underdeveloped. I also feel the same way about Florence Pugh's character, who plays his daughter. I don't feel like there was enough development for those two characters. They just felt like they were thrown in there as plot devices and set up for the next movie, which again, those are other things also where I feel like this movie kind of cheated me a little bit in that it paid off a lot of things from the first one, but it also left the equal amount of things hanging for the future of this franchise. And then obviously you have some of your returning characters like Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron, Dave Bautista is one of the other Harkonnen goons, and then obviously Josh Brolin as Gurney, who I thought was also another great character. He's the only one that we have left other than Paul of the Atreides family, so he's someone that you can latch on to as a character because he's only there to avenge his duke. So I think that's really cool, and I love the fact that he was back in this movie because we don't really have a lot of people that are from the first movie that are from the Atreides bloodline and stuff. So I love the fact that he was there and he kind of added to the story. Now I do kind of want to go into the relationship between Chani and Paul because their relationship to me felt quite rushed, and the reason for that is that it just kind of happens in the first act of the movie. There's no like build up to it. Like in a couple of scenes they just fall in love with each other, which I thought was very rushed. Like I think they have really good chemistry. Like it makes sense why they would fall in love with each other. It just doesn't make sense how fast they fall in love with each other. And I think I think throughout the movie what they do really well is having Chani just kind of react to everything Paul does. It matters so much how she feels about him, and it kind of almost has this Spider-Man and MJ, Peter Parker and MJ from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies feel to it, but done way better. Because in those movies, their relationship just feels really terrible. Here, their relationship feels real, but you can see where sometimes they get distant from each other, and you kind of feel that. There's a lot of gut-wrenching moments because of their relationship, which I thought was really well done, especially as you go into the third act. Another thing I wanted to mention is there's kind of a plot twist in the second half of this movie that just it felt underdeveloped. Now I think there's quite a few things in this movie that felt underdeveloped. I think the plot twist itself was really good, but again, it didn't have enough time to flesh it out and explain exactly what that means. And that brings me to some of my issues with this movie. And I think that this is a movie that, again, it ends really satisfyingly, but it also has an equal amount of things that are just like dangling there, where I'm sitting there like, what? I felt cheated because of that. But also throughout the movie, I think some things felt rushed. Whereas the first movie is quite slow and takes its time in building everything up, this movie still does that with a lot of things. Like a lot of the world building is great, but some of the not world building necessarily, but some of the character development, some of the things that happen to the characters in this movie feel really rushed. Specifically Paul, something happens in the middle of the movie that almost completely changes him as a character, which I thought was really odd and just kind of happened out of nowhere. I also think that the exploration of some of the political stuff outside of the religion stuff in this movie were kind of underdeveloped as to I didn't really know what it meant by the end of the movie. I didn't know, like, some things happened that I don't quite understand, and maybe that has something to do with the fact that I've never read the book. Maybe if you've read the book, that like it works a little better for you. But since I've never read the book, I didn't understand some of the stuff that happens towards the second half of this movie. If you're someone that read the book, I heard that this movie does adapt it a lot. So I don't know if that might be an issue for someone that is a book reader. So I think either way, there's stuff that in this movie I think could have used a little more development. If this movie is like 15-20 minutes longer, if it was actually 3 hours long, I think right now it's 2 hours 40 minutes. I think this is a movie that could really benefit from an extra 15-20 minutes. So I'd love to see like a director's cut or extended cut or something, kind of like the Lord of the Rings films. Now, I don't want to go into those just because it's going to get into spoilers. So I will do a different video talking more specifically about my issues with this movie, because for the most part, I only praise this movie. But the thing is, in a movie like this, where the issues are so little, but everything is so perfect, that the issues do stand out quite a bit to me. I was a little bit let down by the things that let me down, by the things I didn't like, just because of the fact that it wasn't perfect. Because I think so much of this movie is perfect. I think that little bit that isn't just really bugs me, because I think part of that is because of the fact that it sets up things for future that don't really pay off. But there's also other things that just felt underdeveloped to me personally, that I think if they were developed, this would really be one of my favorite movies of all time. So yeah, I will definitely make a spoiler review talking more detail about the issues that I had, but also talking more about the stuff that I liked in this movie. This might be one of the longest spoiler-free reviews I've ever made, so please bear with me here. I'm trying my best to keep it short, but I have a lot to say about this movie. So I'll definitely make a spoiler review, talk more about the specifics as to my issues and as to the stuff that I liked and as to the story of the movie in general, and talk about where I think it's going to go in the future. So for my score, I'm going to go with a 92% for this movie. I gave the first one, I think, a 94 or something like that. So it's a little lower than the first one. But I still think this is a really great film. I really enjoyed it. I think it's great. Maybe on rewatch, I'll change my mind. Maybe on rewatch, I will give this movie 100%. Maybe I'll think it's the greatest thing ever. I think that this is a movie that I'm gonna have the same effect with as the Avatar 2, where Avatar 2, when I first watched it, I gave it, I think, like a 4 out of 5, 80%-ish. And eventually I went up on that score. I went to like 87, 88 or something. I feel like this is gonna happen to this movie too, where I gave it a 92, but I feel like it's definitely gonna go higher on rewatch after I rewatch the first one and this one. And maybe just the more I think about it, I'm gonna like it more. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I really hope it does, because I wanna think this is the greatest movie ever made, like so many other people are saying. But as of right now, I think there's some things that let me down a little bit, that I can't quite give this above a 95%, give it a 5 stars on Letterboxd and stuff like that. I still do slightly prefer the first one, just because it's a more focused story and I feel like it develops everything perfectly, whereas this movie is a little bit lacking in that department. But again, a rewatch might completely change my mind. But I will definitely make a spoiler-filled review talking about all of these things that I have issues with. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Again, like I said, let me know down in the comments if you've seen the movie. What did you think about it, and where are you coming from? Are you someone that has read the book, or are you like me that has never read the book? And if you've not seen it, how excited are you to watch it? I'd love to know your thoughts. If you enjoyed my review, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.